The steel wall scraped against carbon deposits, with the rhythm of meditation, each stroke revealing clean metal beneath layers of accumulated grime. Jessica Torres worked by the pale light of a single fluorescent tube. The old radio in the corner, crackling with static between classic rock songs that seemed to echo from another lifetime. Her coveralls bore the stains of honest labor, oil that had soaked through fabric, grease that had worked its way under fingernails. No amount of scrubbing could completely clean. The engine block sat on her workbench, like a patient undergoing surgery, its components laid out with surgical precision. This was her sanctuary, a corner of Martinez Auto, where she could disappear into the mechanical poetry of pistons and valves, where problems had solutions and every malfunction had a logical cause. The work demanded nothing but competence, asked no questions about her past, required no explanations she couldn't give. But sanctuaries, she would learn, are only as safe as the world allows them to be. The shadows appeared first, dark silhouettes, cutting through the amber glow, spilling from the garage bay. Jessica felt their presence before she saw them, the way prey animals sense predators approaching through tall grass. She looked up from her work to find 4 men standing in the doorway, their posture speaking a language she recognized, but had hoped never to encounter again. Navy SEALs. They moved with the controlled stillness of ocean currents. Powerful, purposeful, inevitable. The lead operator stepped forward, his boots making no sound against the concrete floor despite their obvious weight. He was older than the others, his face weathered by salt spray and desert sand, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had made decisions in places that didn't appear on any map. Without a word, he placed a manila folder on her workbench, the paper pristine against the oil-stained surface. The folder's cover bore no markings, except for a single line of text stamped in red ink. For her eyes only. The SEALs said nothing. They simply watched, their presence filling the small garage, like smoke, transforming her private workspace into something else entirely. A briefing room, an interrogation chamber, a crossroads where her carefully constructed anonymity met forces she had spent years trying to avoid. Jessica's hands trembled as she reached for the folder, her fingers leaving faint smudges on the clean manila surface. Before this moment, Jessica Torres had perfected the art of being overlooked. She arrived at Martinez Auto before dawn, when the shop was empty, except for the lingering smell of yesterday's work and the steady tick of cooling engines. She stayed late, long after her co-workers had retreated to their families and Friday night rituals, finding peace in the methodical process of diagnosis and repair. The customers who brought their vehicles to her bay often asked to speak with one of the real mechanics, their eyes sliding past her, as if competence came only in masculine packaging. She had learned not to argue, not to prove herself through demonstrations of superior knowledge. Instead, she let her work speak. Engines that ran smoother, transmissions that shifted cleaner, problems solved that others couldn't diagnose. Her apartment reflected the same careful anonymity. Clean but sparse, functional but unremarkable. Bills accumulated on the small kitchen table with the persistence of gravity. Rent, utilities, her mother's medical expenses back in Tucson. Each month brought the same calculations, the same careful allocation of resources that always seemed insufficient despite her careful economy. Jessica had chosen invisibility as armor against a world that seemed determined to categorize and dismiss her. She kept her head down, her voice quiet, her ambitions modest. The strategy had worked for 6 years, allowing her to build a small but stable life in the margins of other people's attention. But some things she was about to learn could not be hidden forever. The memories surfaced like oil, seeping through concrete, unwelcome but persistent, carrying with them the acrid smell of her father's cigarettes and the weight of conversations she had been too young to understand. Master Chief Ramirez Torres had been a legend in their household, his service records spoken of in whispers, his decorations stored in a glass case that young Jessica had been forbidden to touch. She remembered fragments, late-night phone calls that ended when she entered the room, visitors who spoke in codes and acronyms, her father's hands shaking slightly when he thought no one was watching. After his funeral, her mother had packed away his uniforms and medals with the desperate efficiency of someone trying to bury the past. "If they ever come for you," her mother had whispered during one of those dark months after the funeral, "it won't be by accident. Your father. There are things about his service that will never be forgotten by them or by the people who might want to use those memories." Jessica had dismissed the warning as the paranoia of grief, the irrational fears of a widow trying to make sense of her husband's death. But now, standing in her garage with 4 Navy SEALs, watching her every movement, those words resonated with the clarity of prophecy fulfilled. She had found her father's dog tags, years later, hidden in a box of Christmas decorations, along with them, a photograph. Her father in dress blues, standing beside men whose faces had been carefully obscured. On the back, someone had written coordinates and a date, followed by a single word, classified. The folder felt heavier than its contents should have allowed. Jessica's hands moved with deliberate slowness as she broke the seal, the adhesive making a soft tearing sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the garage's sudden silence. Inside, reconnaissance photographs showed faces she didn't recognize and locations that looked like they belonged in another world. Desert compounds, urban safe houses, maritime facilities that spoke of operations conducted in shadow but buried. Among the intelligence briefings and tactical assessments was something that made her blood turn to ice water. A personnel file bearing her father's name, his photograph, and operational details that painted a picture of heroism she had never been allowed to see. The final page contained orders signed by officials whose names carried the weight of national security, directing her specifically, by name and social security number, to report for immediate consultation regarding inherited operational parameters and legacy asset activation. The SEAL, who had delivered the folder, stepped closer, his voice carrying the quiet authority of ocean depths. "Your father saved 43 lives during Operation Sandstorm. The mission was so classified that he could never speak of it, never receive public recognition, never tell his family why he carried the weight he did." Jessica's throat felt dry as desert sand. "My father fixed helicopter engines. He was a mechanic. Your father was many things," the SEAL replied, "including the reason 43 Americans came home to their families instead of dying in a Syrian prison. But that operation created complications, long-term security concerns that require ongoing management." He gestured toward the folder, with movements precise as surgical instruments. "Your father's actions saved lives, but they also made enemies, people with long memories and longer reach. For 16 years, we've kept those enemies at bay through various means, but circumstances have changed. The garage seemed to shrink around them, the familiar workspace becoming claustrophobic under the weight of revelation." Jessica stared at the photographs of her father, not the quiet, troubled man she remembered, but a warrior whose courage had been buried in classification levels and national security concerns. "We need your help," the SEAL continued. Not because of what you know, but because of who you are. Your father's bloodline, his operational legacy, carries certain advantages in this particular situation. By morning, word had begun to spread through the small community that surrounded Martinez Auto. Jessica felt the change like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Conversations that died when she approached. Glances that lingered with mixture of curiosity and unease. Questions that hung in the air, unasked but unmistakable. Carlos Martinez, who had given her a job when no one else would, now studied her with cautious eyes. "You got visitors yesterday," he said, his tone carefully neutral. Official-looking types, Jessica nodded, offering no explanation she couldn't give. The classification levels, attached to her father's service record, had been extended to her by association, creating a wall of silence that separated her from everyone she had once considered friend or colleague. At the diner where she usually grabbed lunch, the usual conversations fell quiet when she entered. Maria Santos, who had always greeted her with warmth, now served her coffee with polite distance. The comfortable anonymity Jessica had cultivated for years evaporated like morning mist, replaced by an attention she had never wanted. Her co-worker Danny pulled her aside near closing time, his voice tight with accusation. "People are saying, you're working for the government now, that you're some kind of spy or informant." "People say a lot of things," Jessica replied, but her words carried no conviction. "This job means everything to me," Danny continued. "I got kids, a mortgage. If there's heat coming down on this place, because of whatever you're mixed up in." The threat hung between them, unfinished but clear. Jessica realized that accepting the mission, if that's what the folder represented, would mean burning every bridge she had spent years building.